Hey everybody, welcome back to the program. I finally finished watching all 8 hours of the Get Back Beatles documentary by Peter Jackson. And oh my goodness, it was incredible. I just want to get that out of the way right now. It was amazing, but it was long. I could have easily had that been cut up into 6 parts, but that's besides the point. These are my top 5 takeaways after watching this amazing documentary. Number 5 is Yoko Ono. I want to preface this by saying I don't have a lot of knowledge of this time period. I didn't do a lot of research prior to watching this documentary, and so maybe like you, I just had this notion of Yoko Ono always in somebody's way and interjecting when not appropriate, kind of a thing. But while she was there most of the time right next to John, which I felt was kind of weird, and that was more on John. Like that should have been like, yo, okay. Because, you know, the other guys brought their wives around on occasion, but not to the extent that John and Yoko. But George was bringing some random Hare Krishna people. So at least like they had already known Yoko, and it felt like everyone was somewhat okay with it. At least they were behaving on camera, or at least what they showed us in the edit. So like, I guess it changed my perception of her presence within the Beatles during this recording session. For some reason in my head, I had this different picture. I think she was unfairly vilified over the years. If anything, I just felt like there must have been some unspoken agreement or something going on, like John wouldn't show up without her, so they just were like, okay, you can do this. You really see John like resonate with her right next to him, and I think she was a big muse for him, and her being so close and he's been able to sing and like, you know, look at her, I think made a huge difference with his presence there. Number 4, the cops. I thought there was a lot more cops showing up. Like, again, this is probably my ignorance, but for whatever reason, I just had this image in my head of just, yeah, there was the couple of cops that initially showed up, but then there was like a huge, squadron of officers trying to get up the stairs and onto the roof, kind of a thing. Like they were just ready to arrest the Beatles, but that's not at all what happened. And they were incredibly polite, persistent, but polite. You could tell they were trying to work with the Beatles management, and then Mal comes down and he's just like, oh, I don't know what's going on. I mean, it was so entertaining to watch. And then when the higher ranking officer comes in, that dude I thought was gonna like just like bust down doors, but then he turned out to be incredibly polite. So it was like, what? And then the sweet office lady was like, oh, you probably shouldn't go up on the roof because there's a weight limit and we're already exceeding it and the roof could collapse. And he was like, okay, all right. So yeah, I just had it totally different in my head. It's like Beatles were getting, they were just trying to run through these songs as quick as they could before the cops shut them down. But it was Mal shutting them down, turning off their amps on the very last song. But I think if anything, it was the cold that made them want to stop. Like, because you could see how cold it was. And if you've ever played outside, like, I don't care how good you are, eventually your fingers are just gonna get numb. Number 3, Billy Preston. Oh my goodness, I had no idea the immense impact he had on that recording session. Like, I knew he was on there and I knew he lended something, but until you see him come into the room and you see the Beatles' faces light up and you see he's just jamming with these guys and adding these little fills and stuff, like the mood changes. Like you can't help but smile when he comes into the room, and it makes me appreciate him so much more. And it saddens me that he's no longer with us and that he's not able to finally see this film. And it reminded me back in 1996, I saw him at the Santa Cruz Beach Boardwalk Bandstand. It was one of those free concerts, and I didn't have anything on me at the time other than my schedule of classes for the upcoming school year. And I got his autograph. Like, I got to meet the guy. And at that time, I didn't know who he was other than my dad was telling me, oh yeah, he played with the Beatles. And that's all I knew of him. And I wish I had known the impact that he had on the band then. I mean, I essentially, in my mind, met one of the fifth Beatles. You know what I mean? Like, I don't know, man. I feel like I've come full circle with Billy Preston. And the thing that kills me is the fact that he is barely in the rooftop concert. Occasionally a camera will catch him, but like we'll get 3 cameras on John, and then we have that faraway shot, and then there's, you know, a camera on Ringo. And I felt like that was such a disservice to Billy, because he's like playing his heart out, man. I mean, he is a major component for all the songs they played on the rooftop, and I wish we gotten more footage of him playing, especially when he's knocking out some of those killer solos. Number 2, George Harrison. Oh my goodness, this film was as close as most of us will ever get to being in the same room as the Beatles. That's what it felt like. And to be there when George is expressing, it almost felt like it came out of nowhere, where he was just like, well, why don't we just get Eric to play? Like, he was getting so frustrated. And, you know, subsequently, obviously, this was leading towards him walking out of the band. But in that moment, like, with these guys, and you're the youngest, I'm a little brother, I have 2 older brothers, like, I totally get what he was feeling in that moment. And I just really connected with George. And it just made the Beatles that much more real people who were not perfect and had flaws, and, you know, didn't come up with stuff immediately in the air. Sometimes it took a while for things to develop. Although in the case of Get Back, that was pretty amazing too, watching Paul just come up with that song almost out of thin air. But I digress here. Yeah, but George especially, I really, it's going to sound weird, but grew closer to him via this film. And really all the Beatles in general, I felt like I got to know them so much more. And, you know, I really got to love Ringo. And it was really interesting to see Paul in this leadership role. And then just seeing John be a goofball, and just seeing all these different personalities and how they meshed and how they would clash. Just fascinating, man. And my number 1 takeaway is the overall mood from the Get Back sessions. I guess it was just naive of me, or I just didn't research it properly, or the fact that, you know, Let It Be is not my favorite album by the Beatles, and so I never really looked that much into it. Plus, I haven't really covered that album in depth on this channel, so I haven't really researched what went into the making of the album. And therefore, I was just kind of relying on what other people would say, or what John Lennon would talk about it, and just like what the summary is on Wikipedia, or, you know, just these probably now outdated notions. And granted, I'm not gonna say how John felt was outdated, but when you watch the film, Peter Jackson's film, it totally flips the narrative. I mean, and that was one of the intentions of Peter Jackson going into this, was to show that these sessions were fun. They were creative. One of my favorite moments is when John and Paul are singing without moving their teeth. Or they're playing each other's songs in funny ways. There's so many moments. Like, this video would be almost as long as that documentary if I were to list out all the amazing moments that happened. And there will be probably more to dissect and to look at over the years, because there is just so much content, and it was made for fans by a huge Beatles fan, and I think that's awesome. And it was on the longer side, and that's because Peter Jackson felt, well, if I don't put it in now, it's going to get locked up in a vault for 50 years, and fans are going to want to see this. Like, there's moments where like that guitar falls over, and I'm like screaming at the TV, like, no. Oh my goodness. It was remarkable. It was just, you're in the room with the band, and I loved that. And there were obviously moments where it gets uncomfortable. Like, I'm not supposed to be watching these guys argue. But the parts 2 and 3 is when it really shines, and you see, like, what a beautiful exchange between George and John, when George is expressing, yeah, I have all these songs and I want to sing them. I want to put together an album. Like, that was amazing. Or seeing Ringo with the beginnings of Octopus's Garden. seeing little Heather and just having fun with the band and singing with them in Yoko's style. And especially when, like I mentioned, when Billy comes in, the mood totally changes and they feel productive. And then George Martin comes in and starts being a more active voice in what they're doing. And like things are, you know, snowballing into the rooftop concert. And it's just so many amazing little gems of moments that I am forever grateful for Michael Lindsay Hogg and the camera work by his camera operators and the sound operators, just gathering all this stuff up. I mean, I just have such a great, a newfound appreciation, not only for the Beatles, but you know, there's people who surrounded them, their friends and family, Glenn Johns, Mal Evans, that kid Kevin holding up the lyric sheet for John on the rooftop. I mean, that guy was a trooper. It's just incredible to see, you know, these guys who a lot of us look at as legends, and you see them as human beings with flaws and great qualities. And it's just, it was remarkable. All right, everybody, that will do it for today. I'm curious to know what you have to say. Be sure to leave me a comment down below with your top 5 takeaways. Or I saw this on Reddit. This was a pretty cool post. What album would you pick to have a film like this done? Like, had there been cameras rolling for Please Please Me, Revolver, Sgt. Pepper's, Abbey Road, which would be your preferred album for this treatment to have been done? It's a hypothetical, I know, but I just thought that was cool. For me personally, I would love to have seen, it's a toss-up between Revolver and Sgt. Pepper's. It's one of those. I feel like I might have to go Sgt. Pepper's, you know, to see Penny Lane and see Strawberry Fields Forever get played. That would have been incredible. Anyway, thank you all so much for watching. I'm your Vinyl Geek, and I'll catch you on the flip side.